You know what? There's gotta be some reasons not to do Airbnb. So in the spirit of fairness, today, let's talk about the pros and cons of an Airbnb business model and really what makes Airbnb hard. Because at this point, maybe I should talk you out of it, if anything. Because if you're gonna commit to these videos on this YouTube channel, you're gonna commit some serious time to learning a business. And though it's made me a ton of money, maybe it just fits with my personality type. So in my experience, 7 years doing Airbnb, the tens of thousands of customers that I have served, and all of the horror stories that I'm about to tell you, let me tell you why you may not want to do Airbnb. And maybe if you can survive the cons, maybe then it's for you. My name's Sean Rakic. Welcome to my TED Talk. Let's jump in. This one's gonna need a coffee, ladies and gentlemen. The first thing you need to understand is that Airbnb is a business, and all businesses have risks. And some businesses require different resources, right? This business isn't necessarily a cash-heavy business, but it's a human element-heavy business. It's touch-heavy because this is hospitality. And so the first con, right, or the first danger, it's not necessarily even a con, but the very first hurdle to succeeding on Airbnb is your interpersonal skills and your patience. It will absolutely be tested. So we've had all sorts of experiences that I could make anecdotal for you here on how your patience can get tested. When I first started, I did everything on my own, up to about 25 or 30 listings. And I would constantly get phone calls at midnight, 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, because people lost their keys, they locked themselves out. This is before smart locks, or before I learned about smart locks. And I got burned out on stupid people doing stupid stuff. And that's really the largest part of like losing your patience for customers, because they won't read your house rules, they won't read the check-in instructions, they won't remember where to return the parking pass or return the key sometimes. And a lot of the work that you have to do is compensating for a high level of stupid. And I don't mean to disrespect any Airbnb guests, but I guess maybe I'm more so just disrespecting humanity at large, because a lot of us have the capability to exercise an extreme level of stupid in certain circumstances. And maybe that's what gets you to start a business in the first place. Maybe it's a little dumb to take so much risk. So in the spirit of stupidness, let's continue. One of the bigger cons that people are really getting more vocal about with the Airbnb business model is to get into the industry, you are largely relying on other people. Airbnb specifically, VRBO, Booking.com. These are called online travel agencies. Now, they have lowered the barrier to entry in the transient market world. You don't have to buy a hotel, that's a pro. But the con here is Airbnb can just ban you, right? And it's rare, but I've seen the sweetest people in the world just get outright banned. This girl in my DMs, let me show you some information here on the screen. She is the type of superhost, and she's always been a superhost with a very small number of properties, lots of 5-star reviews. She's the type of person who will bake you some cookies and bring you some cookies. That's what Airbnb has always wanted from their platform, is hosts that go above and beyond for their guests. But now that Airbnb is a publicly traded company, they are now at odds with their own value structure, and they're banning good people for a risk. Maybe showing up to a door with cookies during the middle of COVID is the problem. But banning that person permanently without the ability for them to adjust their behavior, that's kind of scary. So one of the bigger cons in this is if you do invest any money at all into an Airbnb business and you have anything unsavory in your background, you've done stuff with other people who have unsavory backgrounds, and if their background check was bad enough and it bled into having a relationship with you, or if you've been associated with any addresses that have been banned on Airbnb, it's like playing a game of Minesweeper here. You could accidentally step on a ban mine, and that would really suck. And so I have seen it enough that it's notable to mention as a big con. That, of course, is against the pro that you can finally get into the industry, right? If you picked up a property and you wanted to get into short-term rentals, what would you do? You'd put your place on Craigslist and try to start your own website and hope that people would find you through a Google search. That would have been really tough. So take it with a grain of salt. Another con is it is getting more competitive. When I started teaching you all 5 years ago, 2017-ish, there weren't really a lot of hosts out there. I've created a lot of my own competition. There's a lot of good hosts in Houston, and even they are starting to suffer because of an oversaturation in Houston. So some cities, you're oversaturated. Some cities, it's not really feasible to run at a high profit margin for a while until hosts go out of business. There's a cycle here where people get into the industry on optimism, they fail and they go out of business, right? That's why this video exists. But then the best of the hosts, the ones who are most cost efficient, will survive, and then their profit margins will go up as supply corrects and goes back down, for example. But even in markets that are not oversaturated, the level of competition is higher. It is harder for you to enter into a market and be the best. You can't just watch 5 Airbnb videos on Airbnb Automated and be better than everybody because everybody else has watched the same 5 videos on Airbnb Automated, right? So it's becoming more competitive. You need to not only know what you're doing, but you have to like what you're doing, and you have to go through a few cycles of failure and improvement to level up on some stuff that you probably don't know much about. Things like interior design matter more than ever. If you can, on a good budget, create a beautiful space, you can compete. Right? I didn't say if on a budget you can create a beautiful space, you'll crush it. That used to be something I could promise you in 2017. Now, in a lot of markets, budget, beautiful space, you can compete. No promise that you'll be the best. There are some cities in the Midwest that promise still exists. As long as you come into the market looking good, you'll do well. There are still cities like that, but they're more and more rare, and that's a con. The flip side of that is a pro. The reason why it is so oversaturated and so competitive is the numbers make a lot of sense. This is a cash-friendly business to start. You don't need a lot of money, especially with rental arbitrage. You can convince a landlord to give up a property on a lease, say, hey, yeah, run the thing. And you pay the rent, you buy the furniture, you do your thing, and you can make cash flow for property you don't own. And per studio apartment, we get in for $5,000, maybe $7,000 invested per studio apartment, maybe $15,000 per house. That's a really low amount of money to invest to start making $800 a month on a studio or make $3,000 a month on a house. If you invest $15,000 in anything and it immediately prints you $3,000 a month like an annuity for years, that's a really good business. So of course, you're gonna see some competition because it makes money. So now, to make that much money, you need to be better at the game. You need to continue to improve and innovate. So stay a student for life, and you can survive. You can survive in this industry. Other people go out of business. Sometimes it'll be really hard. Sometimes it'll feel like easy street. We just survived COVID. There's a lot of bad there, but some good there as well. The pro of COVID is that people don't like hotels as much anymore. So more of the demand is flowing into houses and apartments and flowing away from hotels. So some of that competition from hotels is starting to become less relevant. That's really cool. The con of COVID is we are still seeing a drought in certain types of travelers, right? A lot of European markets are still suffering because a lot of people still can't travel there. And to go to Canada, you have to be vaccinated, for example. To get back from Mexico, you have to have a negative COVID-19 test. You can get there, but good luck getting back, things like that. And so different countries are going to have different timelines that things get back to normal, if ever. And this will change how you do business with these types of customers. We no longer have the data to say this is exactly how you treat people from this part of the world. That, when those doors open, could be a completely different thing. Now, there is opportunity here. My philosophy about business and about challenges and about change is anytime that things change, just like sands sifting, things can move up. Without that change, it's really hard for you to punch through something that's static. So shifting of regulations and consumer sentiment and habits and stuff allows you to find your way up and climb your way up through that shifting. So try to look at it positively. Even though it is a challenge, it's a challenge for everybody. And if it's a challenge for everybody, in a way it becomes neutral and an advantage to those that are the most motivated. And since COVID has become a topic, one of the other cons of Airbnb or the business model is the level of scrutiny that hosts can go under. If your property is not perfectly clean, a guest will get a refund. No questions asked. Really rough. Airbnb has counteracted this with something called AirCover to try to cover hosts in more ways to offset a little bit of this danger sentiment that hosts are feeling. But it's also become popular knowledge in Reddit threads and online that you can pretty much stay at an Airbnb, and if you do a good job as a guest filing complaints in vague ways, you can get a free stay at the expense of a host. And that's really tough. So Airbnb still needs to make some adjustments to really understand that reputation should matter here. That's actually a bit of advice that I gave Brian Chesky in a previous video. I was like, here's some things that you should adjust. And an internal scorecard for reputation maybe one that hosts can even see, like peek through the window to see that they're building a reputation with Airbnb, would be important. Because if you think about it, a host who's only had 2 reservations, there's not a lot of data to say that they're consistent and trustworthy. But if you have a provider with thousands of doors, hundreds of thousands of reservations, and they maintain a level of quality to some degree, you can surmise that if a guest who has no reviews, has been on the platform for 3 weeks, comes in and says something wild, but that business over hundreds of thousands of reservations has never had that wild allegation, this newbie might be coming in with some sort of weird game plan. So this is something I hope Airbnb changes and we can remove that con off the table, but right now there are some scammy guests, and Airbnb's level of scrutiny that they're holding against hosts to maintain their third-party reputation through COVID is putting undue pressure on hosts that does make it harder to keep your money. Another con is if you're learning, there's a lot of scammers, and that's unfortunate. I would just tell you, without me throwing paint on so many other gurus out there, if they're not willing to teach you 90% of what can be learned in this industry for free, just ignore everything else that they say. There are a few people on this planet that are willing to teach you for free. They're like companies like Bigger Pockets that specialize in real estate, and they've taught like real estate for free in large. There's a guy, and his name is Pix Imperfect. He teaches you how to do Photoshop for free. Like, these are the examples that I'm talking about. Airbnb, we're Airbnb Automated. We've been committed to free content as much as possible, right? There are a few things that are proprietary to my business that I won't share with you, but they're my distinct advantages, and I'll just keep those secret. But 90 plus something percent of what you can learn to be a good Airbnb host is free here. There's a guy named Richard Fertig who largely talks about buying properties. My best friend Sean Ray, he's a real estate agent here in Dallas, talks about buying properties. And as much as humanly possible, these types of people give away free information. Like, Sean Ray doesn't coach, he doesn't have a course, he will never sell one, so everything that he makes on his YouTube channel is just because he wants to share it. There are all sorts of other people that will sell you lists, will sell you mentorship packages, and if you don't see content flowing every single day out of them that's actually educational, look past all the, hey, look at my watch, look at my Lambo kind of stuff. If you can look past all that and ask yourself, is this person saying intelligent things on what I should do next with my business and giving me hacks and actually giving me real information? If they don't do that every day, that's a bad sign, because if they convince you to pay for something on the back end, you really don't have any proof that that product's going to be worth your time. So for now, one of the cons is, just like with most other new industries, there's a bunch of fake gurus out there, and you need to be careful who you trust. Okay? Get into Facebook groups, communities, and ask hosts instead. Get on the Hosts of Airbnb Automated, Airbnb Masterminds, Airbnb host groups in your city, and ask the court of public opinion what you should do. And take a lot of those responses with a grain of salt, but try to look for some consensus. If you can't trust a single speaker like me or another person, you can always find answers within the host community. I'm sure people want me to bring this up as a potential con, but it's a business, but we're still going to talk about it. With Airbnb, if you do arbitrage, which I do, and you lease properties, it can be difficult to get a landlord to say yes, but there's definitely systems to get landlords to say yes, and there's some landlords that obviously will say yes based on situations that they're in. We cover that stuff in other videos. But when you arbitrage, you don't own the property, right? So you have a harder time making profit, per se. So arbitrage versus ownership, I will give this to some owners. If you buy a property, if you are currently the owner of a property and you're trying to decide what to do with it, hands down, you should Airbnb it, as long as you can handle that hospitality aspect of it. It will make more money than a long-term rental, because your long-term rental, you'll collect the mortgage plus 50%, maybe as much as 100% over the top of what your expenses are. That would be awesome if you could collect 100% over your mortgage, but you're probably not, right? But with a short-term rental approach, you can collect 4 times, 5 times, 6 times your mortgage, and that's not normal in the long-term rental market. So you can make more money. But with arbitrage, I would have to pay you the rent. Right. So if your mortgage is $1,500, you might flip that thing to $2,800 for me, for a 4-bedroom house, something like that. And in that case, I now have to hit $2,800 before I even break even or start making a profit. With you, that $1,500 mortgage, you make money after $1,500, which is an extra $1,300 of advantage, and you do get some debt pay down on that mortgage payment. So owning a property to Airbnb, you'll make profit sooner. So if you're not good at this game, if you're not good at maximizing your revenue, buying a property is an easier way to still be profitable. If you're going to do arbitrage and rent properties, you need to be serious about this game and be dedicated to maximizing your revenue and maximizing your profit. If you're not good at this, if you're bad at Airbnb, then you may not become profitable. And that would be really sad. And normally I would say nobody ever is not profitable, but I have seen some properties not profit. Mostly houses, expensive houses where somebody, didn't follow some best practices, but I've seen some people not be profitable with some properties. Because of how competitive it is now, it's possible to not make money with a property. So owning is a great way to get in a way, but it's also really cost restrictive. Maybe if you use an FHA loan and then eventually get into Airbnb part-time, you can do 14 days of Airbnb per year, I think, with an FHA loan. So you can even try it out, see if you like it with a property you own. And if you resonate with that, then flip into arbitrage, because that's where you can make all of your profit. You make much more profit if you're good at the game because of the cost that it takes to get in. But there's other videos talking about the math of that. And so when we get high level looking at something like arbitrage, specifically with Airbnb, when you lease apartments, there is another aspect of complexity in that business model, which is you have to keep your leases. You have to keep your landlord happy, or if they non-renew you, you have to find more leases. You don't just get to sit on one property for 30 years, right? So a lease ends in a year, 2 or 3, you might get a renewal, you might not. So my business with 100 plus leases, we have a salesperson that's dedicated to picking up new leases, negotiating new deals. Now, there is an advantage here too, and it's a good pro to outweigh this con, which is we talk landlords into giving us 6 or 8 weeks of rent for free. And so if we ever have to move, we already own the furniture, and it might take us a week and a half to tear down and set back up. So we lose a week and a half of income and operations, but we just got 6 weeks of rent for free, which offsets our loss of profit, loss of revenue. And it's like a little bonus to move. So if we ever do have to move, as long as we negotiate the right deal next, we're fine, right? But it's still an extra part of the business. You're not just in hospitality, you're constantly negotiating deals with landlords. And you have to be careful for that. One of the larger cons that's lately a COVID-based, post-COVID, inflation, current economy kind of thing is that it's harder and harder to find housekeepers. And if you don't run your own housekeeping company, right, you haven't recruited housekeepers, trained them yourselves, pay them by the hour or something like that, and you don't have control of those people, now you're at the whim of third-party housekeeping companies. And because of this, the supply and demand issue, they're becoming way more expensive and they're becoming way more unreliable. And so if you have a couple houses on Airbnb, be prepared to clean yourself when a housekeeping company just doesn't show up to clean, right? Now, this is a business again. All of these cons are things that businesses should be managing. Cons are risks. In business, that's all they really are. You need to be objective about the risks involved in your industry. Because when we look at all sorts of other industries, there's a lot of cons, right? If you owned a tow company, one of the cons is that you need these crazy expensive insurances to tow people's cars off of property, and you might get shot at if you're the tow truck driver, right? You go repo a car or go tow a car out of a spot that they're not supposed to be in, and you get into altercations with people. People get violent. People try to damage your property. That's a con of owning a tow company. But tow companies are super profitable. They're just super profitable because you're holding people's cars hostage until they pay. So that's an example of sometimes you may not want to expose yourself to risk where somebody might violently attack you because you're taking their car because the owner of a parking lot requested it. More on the nose, the risk of being a landlord in general is that if you give somebody a lease for a year and they don't move out or they quit paying rent, you're going to have to evict them. And the eviction process really, really sucks. And if a person moves out and trashes the property and you thought you'd be able to have another tenant within a short period of time, you're going to have to renovate the property and do all these fast repairs and big repairs, and that could cost you thousands and thousands of dollars, where if you're not experienced as a landlord, you don't know how to collect tenant leverage and protect yourself against tenant damages, you could actually lose money as a landlord, and it could be a pain in the tail. Evictions are not fun. And online businesses like Shopify sites, Amazon FBA businesses where you're trend chasing, trying to find a product that will sell. You need to be able to sell that thing and drop ship it fast, and your margins are going to be really low, and you have to run a bunch of ads, and you can lose money on your ad spend. All sorts of businesses, as cool as they seem on the front end, they all do have risks. They all have risks. So when you look at the risks in this Airbnb world, right, your hospitality business, it's hinging on guest satisfaction. Your key human resource is housekeepers, and there's been a housekeeper shortage lately, and you need to be good at maintaining your housekeepers. If you're just getting started, you're going to be leaning too much on Airbnb and VRBO, and you don't have your own direct booking website, your own base of customers, you don't have experience to go get your own customers. You're going to have to kind of get through that forest of the online travel agency world. And if it takes you a long time to figure this out, making properties that are popular and bringing them up to competitive standard, you might lose money on the front end, quite possibly. It's possible. So these are the cons. So if you have questions about the cons and how I navigate some of them, watch other videos, just search your question, or if you can't find a video that I've already made on how to address that key market situation, ask me the question in the comments, because that's why I'm here, is to help you understand where you can go in this space. I've made over $10 million on Airbnb. I've been around a long time, and I love it. And we're gonna stick around. Haley, if you don't know, Haley runs my entire business. I'm fully automated. With over 100 properties, Haley runs all the operations. She has a sales guy, picks up new leases. They get furniture, they move in. I haven't seen maybe more than a few of our most recent properties we've picked up. So it is definitely possible to continue to grow and build and stay in business. So if you like this business model idea, if you want to get into hospitality, if you like high cash flow, and you're cool with managing housekeepers, maybe this is for you. So talk to me in the comments, and as always, I'll see you on the other side.